I clearly see the return of the sort of investment cycle across a number of sectors, whether it's FDI coming in traditional sectors or new sectors like defense, which I think is very much in the news these days, leaving aside a few sort of sensitive sectors like retail and others. But I see the investment cycle very much back. Obviously, we'll have to wait till the budget to see some formal announcements on that. But I'm very hopeful, and I think the mood not only in sort of in India but also foreign investors is extremely positive, as they're seeing a government that is approaching this in a very business-like sort of way.
So are you noticing a trend that might soon pan out in terms of more inbound M&A, because there are sectors like infra, construction, insurance seems to be a major point as well, and of course defense. So are you seeing more inbound queries coming in, and can we see more inbound M&As?
So I think in the next few months we'll probably see more a capital raising cycle. I think the M&A cycle is certainly building up, but it may take 3 to 6 months perhaps for some of it to build out, because M&A by its very nature is more complex, and we'll need to see now whether Indian corporates or promoters are in a mood to sell, or they would like to just restructure and continue to be in the game with probably a recapitalized balance sheet. I think so the dynamic has changed. But nonetheless, I think M&A is going to be a very big theme as well. But I would give it a sort of a 6 to 12 month kind of cycle. And there are a couple of triggers that are required, such as tax, I think is a very big issue that needs to be sorted out. Simplicity in terms of just getting approvals. So all these are sort of big themes that are playing out. But it all seems to be on the agenda.
You spoke about tax clarity, and that's a major sore point as far as the international investor sentiment is concerned. There's a lot of hope being pinned on the upcoming budget as to whether or not the retrospective tax laws, which have been rather controversial, will be revoked. Do you think that if the government doesn't revoke the retrospective tax law, do you think that's going to have an immediate impact, and the investment sentiment might soon turn negative again?
I won't put it as strongly as if he doesn't do something, he'll turn negative. But certainly, I can say that if there is clarity and this whole retrospective issue is sort of put out of the way once and for all, that it will be a huge boost in terms of the sentiment. Not doing it may not be as bad, but doing it will be extremely good. And I think that, of course, we'll only know when the budget comes out. But I personally think it's one of the low-hanging fruit that can be easily solved.
You also spoke about capital raising. So clearly, are you looking at more QIPs coming in, more IPOs following QIPs?
It'll be all of the above, because corporate India, I think, is back in the mood to invest on the ground again. So it'll be a combination of new companies coming in through IPOs, QIPs, all sorts of instruments. You'll see return of debt as well. So,
any sectors which you would earmark as far as capital raising is concerned? Where do you see most companies which are equity staffed coming in? Which sectors?
I think it's of course a little early to judge, but again, in terms of how we are seeing companies think about it, it is across sectors. Obviously, infrastructure will be a bigger piece, but it's also the most risky, because there are a number of more substantive issues in relation to each sector that need to be sorted out.
So one sector that has hogged the limelight in the recent past is the telecom sector. The Indian telecom market is clearly overcrowded as compared to some of the international markets. What kind of consolidation do you see as a premier deal maker going ahead in the telecom sector?
When the government came up with the M&A guidelines for the telecom sector, clearly they recognized that and wanted to sort of cause that consolidation itself. But the guidelines themselves seem a little bit more work before they can actually result in deals.
All right, sir. One final question. In terms of deal trends, you've spoken about inbound deals and the possibility of that happening. You're saying that that might not happen immediately. What about outbound deals, sir? Do you think there is an appetite, or is it too early days yet?
I think there's an appetite, but I think the bigger trend is inbound, because now with whatever has changed and is changing, the opportunity is here. There might be opportunistic kind of acquisitions outside, but I don't think that's the bigger trend. The bigger trend, I think, is inside.
I'll slip in one last question. You must be getting a lot of feelers and queries and inquiries from a lot of international clients. Which sector is there maximum appetite for?
It's probably too general a question. I think we're seeing it across, and infrastructure is definitely one of them. And opportunistic acquisitions on, in the TMT space.
What about pharma, sir?
Pharma has always been a sort of a key sector. So it's we saw some large deals happen recently as well. So pharma will always be there. I think is because the industry is sort of matured now as well. So you'll see more activity there too. So overall, I'm very hopeful.
Anything on the regulatory front which you're expecting from the government from a policy point of view, which can help propel M&A any areas where the government possibly needs to look at strongly?
The biggest issue is tax at a sort of a government level, and there are lots of smaller issues at the regulator level for public markets. So SEBI has to work on a number of things. And from what we heard this morning, I think they're pretty much onto all these topics and are dealing with it. So it's not as if there's a lack of ideas. I think it's now about execution.